is apropos. As Russian forces slowly but steadily gain ground in costly battles for largely devastated areas of eastern and southern Ukraine, back in Moscow, the economy too is slowing as the Kremlin spends vast sums on its war effort. While the economy did grow robustly at over 4% in 2023 and last year, far faster than G7 countries, despite multiple rounds of Western sanctions, that growth has stalled sharply this year. With the details, here's Coming Out.
As the Russian president weighs up his options in Ukraine, the state of his country's economy could sway his decision. Russia's finance minister announced a downgrade in GDP outlook for this year, months after the economy minister warned that Russia was on the brink of a recession.
This year, we've been seeing quite tough conditions for the implementation of monetary credit policy. We see that the rate of economic growth, however, will be no less than 1.5%, at least according to the assessment of the Ministry of Economic Development in the current year.
It's not a recession yet, but it's far below the earlier 2.5% forecast. The IMF, meanwhile, only puts Russia's GDP growth outlook at 0.9% after 2 years of robust growth. Its war economy grew more than 4% in 2023 and 2024, despite multiple rounds of Western sanctions, due to massive spending in defence and military industries and oil and gas exports to Asia. Labour shortages also pushed up wages, and government payouts to soldiers and their families boosted consumption. That influx of cash has even led to the emergence of a new middle class in Russia's poorest industrial regions. Inflation did soar due to supply shortages, but the central bank was able to bring it back under control by raising its key interest rate to 21% in October, the highest level since the early days of Putin's presidency. However, despite the central bank slightly lowering interest rates to 18% in July, borrowing costs have been applying huge pressure on business investment, with many firms simply unable to access capital. It's becoming increasingly likely that Putin's war economy was a short-term boom reliant on defence spending. And though it's already showing signs of slowing down, putting an end to the war could risk bursting the bubble altogether. Beneath the war effort, there's little attempt to diversify the economy, and as hundreds of thousands of men continue to die fighting in Ukraine, Russia's labour shortage will only worsen. Putin now faces a dilemma: continue the war economy model but risk slipping into a recession, or end the conflict and trigger an immediate economic shock.
For more, we're joined now by Alexander Kolyandr, Senior Fellow with the Democratic Resilience Programme at the Centre for European Policy Analysis. Alexander, thanks so much for being with us. You are a specialist in the Russian economy and Russian politics also. So after experiencing such strong growth over the past 2 years, how significant is this economic slowdown? When exactly did it begin and why?
So thank you very much for having me. Yes, you're absolutely right. There is a slowdown which started probably at the very end of the past year, but it became noticeable at the beginning of 25. And we see it not only in the GDP figures, but also in production volumes. So if you take Russian industrial production, you'll see that only those parts of the economy which include production for the military, for the army, and for the war effort are growing at significant pace. The rest, the civil part of the economy, is not growing at all, and in some parts it is actually contracting. So this is mostly the result of the high interest rate imposed by the Central Bank of Russia, which in turn was a result of unlimited, almost unlimited spending from the state coffers for the war needs and for the replacement of everything that Russia had imported before the beginning of the invasion in 2022. However, it cannot last forever. So such a stimuli coming from the budget cannot sustain a 4% growth forever. So sooner or later, economy has it enough. Sooner or later, and that came in 25, Russian economy just realized that more money you pump into the economic machine, less economic growth you have. More money does not translate into a higher growth, higher production, or higher consumption. We see in the past couple of months that real wages stopped their growth. So in other words, inflation is eating up people's income. We see a drop in consumer spending, which started with a drop with consumer loans, and which is a result of the high rate, but then people started to spend less on everything which is not essential. We see that the share of the food in consumption is growing again to the levels seen before the war. And most probably the economic boom of 23-24 is over, at least for some time. Now the main task of the Russian government is to deliver a soft landing, not to see an economic collapse similar to what we saw, say, in the Soviet days. However, I think that whatever are the economic headwinds, they would not stop at this stage Putin from his political, geopolitical, and military aims in Ukraine. The economic problems in Russia are not enough for Putin and the Kremlin to stop what they see as war, as an existential war in Ukraine.
Yeah, and you say that the Kremlin's preference for continued spending up until now to finance the war is creating tension between monetary and fiscal policy goals. How close is Russia technically to slipping into recession?
Russia is pretty close to a technical recession, only by minimal figures, it managed to avoid it in the second quarter, but I don't think that it matters. The Kremlin doesn't care whether there is a very limited recession or a very slow growth. From the point of view of the Kremlin, it's all the same. It doesn't change anything at all. The main problem now is the budgetary problem. The budget is hit from two sides. First of all, the price of oil is lower than what the government had expected last year. So the oil revenue is below the plan. And on the other hand, the slowing economy delivers lower tax receipts. So from both sides, from oil and non-oil revenues, the budget is getting less. However, the budget and the government and the Kremlin, which is a political decision, is not going to cut military spending this year. And I suspect they will not cut defense spending in 2026 either. So they will try to increase taxes without increasing taxes. So they might increase VAT on some luxury goods. They might increase fines and payments for various government services. They will also try to cut expenses on everything that is not needed for the war effort and that is not needed for the social stability. But it is mortgaging your future. So I don't think that Russia is facing an economic collapse or economic crisis yet this year or beginning of the next. It will not be of the magnitude to change the political aims, but Russia is mortgaging its future, and the problems it is trying to sweep under the carpet will emerge in years to come.
And Alexander, how is all of this affecting the Russian population? We hear reports that people are being hit by fuel shortages, but as we've been reporting, people are also gaining financially from the war, not just the families of soldiers, but people who are also working for the war effort at home.
And not only the war effort, it's when you pump money into the economy, companies increase production, so they start to compete for workers. And there is also competition for the same workers from the army, which needs those people on the front line. Not to mention about 700,000 people who left Russia in the past 3 years. So there is a constant shortage of the workforce in Russia. The problem could have been sorted by importing workers from the former Soviet republics of the Central Asia, but here the Russian government is afraid of popular discontent and is actually limiting this influx of migrants. So that leads to higher salaries. There was an enormous competition for workers, which resulted in salaries rising by double digits in 2023 and 24. So people benefited from the war, not only on the front line or at the tank production factory. They benefited from that everywhere. The cash tills at the supermarket or at the IT company. However, this party is almost over because salaries are not rising, because demand for workers is not growing, because economy is slowing down. Now, with the salaries stagnating and inflation is still pretty high by historical or by Western standards, it is still at about 9%. Inflation will be eating up people's savings and people's incomes. That's why people are pretty reluctant to spend on anything but food, and they are tightening their belts, expecting harder times ahead.
Alexander, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thanks so much for your analysis. That is Alexander Kolyandr, Senior Fellow with the Democratic Resilience Programme at the Centre for European Policy Analysis. Well, that is it.